Here's how I think about city government and how to run a progressive city where you actually need to get things done. Is it's really awesome to know where we want to get and like what do we want the legislature to do? What do we want the national environment to look like so we can do whatever we want? And I don't want to build a plan for our city that relies entirely on outside actors doing what I want them to do.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
Okay, we're back in St. Paul for the Wedge Live podcast for another Ward 4 City Council Special Election Candidate episode. Joining me today is Molly Coleman. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for coming to St. Paul.
Where are we right now, Molly?
We are biking through Hamlin Midway, right actually near my house, headed down Thomas towards the bike lane, but not yet on a bike lane.
I apologize for starting. Well, that was kind of close. I apologize for starting the episode this way, but are you facing attacks for being the daughter of Norm Coleman?
Yeah, my close familial relationship with Norm Coleman is definitely hurting me in this race.
I've been planning that joke since we scheduled this. Are other people doing that?
No, but honestly, people are legitimately asking me it, like kind of often. Somebody alerted me to the existence of a Reddit thread that's asking if I'm related to Norm Coleman, and I get it on the doors, so here it is.
So what are the big issues in Ward 4?
There are a lot, honestly. So, I mean, we're starting this parade in Midway. I think in general, the topic of Midway touches a lot of kind of the current issues. We'll go left here.
Okay.
There's a lot of conversations around neighborhoods in the ward that have been experiencing pretty significant disinvestment, pretty serious concerns over public safety, sort of vacant buildings, lack of just generally the type of vibrancy that you want to see in a city. So that's huge. Obviously, we just got the news this week about the Cub closing. Here in Midway, that's technically Ward 1, but definitely impacts folks in Ward 4 and throughout Midway. So that's big. Also touches on public transit. We're just off the Green Line. I think, safety around the Green Line, encouraging people to use the Green Line, how we're getting folks to utilize multimodal transit is huge. Housing, super pressing. We've had years now of rent stabilization conversations throughout the city. Continues to be really top of mind for people. And then I think also with the zoning changes that we've seen the last couple of years in St. Paul, which I'm really excited about, really supportive of, there are a lot of conversations about how we navigate both the opportunities and the challenges that come with that in order to build the housing that the community needs. So there's a whole host of other stuff. I think like generally affordability, how are we dealing with rising property taxes? Those property taxes obviously affect homeowners, but are also passed on to renters. So, I could go on and on, but right. I think that those are the top issues.
So the Cub Foods closing, there's a Cub Foods in Uptown that is also closed right now. I don't really know why, repairs, and it's coming back at some undetermined time.
Interesting.
Do you know if the Cub Foods closing here is about a public safety issue? Is it that Cub Foods doesn't know how to run a grocery store? Do you have a sense of that?
So what we know is that other people, I think that there's certainly a lot of the conversation in the community is this a public safety issue? Target is making it work in Midway. Aldi is making it work in Midway. So this idea that there is a public safety crisis to the point that no grocery store can safely operate in Midway is inaccurate at best. I think that based on what I have heard from folks at the city, there have been very real frustrations with Cub management, feeling like they have failed to be a true partner and really tried to make this work. And frankly, like, we've known this was coming. People have known that there have been no carts at that Midway Cub for months and months now. Like, the disinvestment was clear. It was clear that the ownership was not going to give it a real shot. But it's almost 100 union jobs right here in Midway. It was the most accessible kind of full service grocery store we had. It was a pharmacy. We've had the closed CVS for 3 years, so that was, a key piece of community infrastructure that people relied on. I don't know, it's super devastating and super, super aggravating, honestly.
There's been a local conversation about municipal grocery stores. It's been talked a lot in the New York City mayor's race. There's a study that the Minneapolis City Council initiated. Do you think that is a viable course or needs to be studied?
It's a really good question. So, it's come up here, and we'll go right here. It's definitely come up in conversations in St. Paul. I think that it is super interesting and worth us looking into more. I read the Minneapolis study. I think that was quite informative for how I'm thinking about it. Basically, what I see is there are 3 core reasons why you would pursue a municipal grocery store. One is to deal with a food desert. If you can't get a for-profit grocery store to come in, I think that would be a great reason to pursue a municipal grocery store. 2 is in an effort to cut down costs, the rising cost of groceries and food for everybody. 3rd is just as a general principle, we think that the government should be in the business of meeting people's basic needs rather than outsourcing that to private companies. I think that the conversation around it in St. Paul has largely been out of concern about the first of those, that we really want to deal with what feels like a rising number of food deserts downtown, concern about that in the Midway, even though fortunately we do still have some grocery stores. And my perspective is that if we're serious about getting grocery stores downtown or in Midway, the fastest way to do that is not to get the government engaged in running a grocery store, which is going to be hard and take a long time, but to work really diligently to get a grocery store to come into those spaces that meets the need of the community. I think that what we've seen in other cities, Chicago spent a long time looking at a municipal grocery store. They decided not to do it. I think about Madison a lot, where I went to college. Let's go left. Madison has been working for, I think, 7 years to get not even a municipal grocery store, but a city-owned building with a private grocery store set up. It just takes a really, really long time. So I think that long-term, it's definitely something we should look into. I don't know if for right now, for St. Paul, it will make sense.
What do you think about rent control? The way St. Paul did it has become kind of a rallying cry for opponents of it in Minneapolis. Like, well, let's not do what they did over there. It's since been amended in St. Paul. Do you think it's in a good place now? Does it need to be changed?
We're starting with all the easy questions. So I think that we are at a fine place right now, and we need to move into thinking about what else are we doing to address the housing crisis. We've had a kind of rent stabilization as the core topic of conversation when it comes to housing for years and years now. And I think we all knew when the city voted to enact rent stabilization a couple years back that it was just one tool of many that we needed to be pursuing in order to make our city actually affordable and livable for everybody. And I think we need to let the status quo remain the status quo and start moving forward and start getting more creative about how else are we addressing housing. So I think that to my mind, and this has been a huge issue in this race, this was sort of the most controversial issue, at least for the first few months before the council voted to amend the ordinance. It's super hard, right? Like, I voted for rent stabilization in the first place. I think that it was important to take a really big swing at a really big problem of housing affordability. I think what we saw was some pretty unacceptable unintended consequences, including the slowdown of new construction, which we desperately need in a city that has a housing shortage. So I'm hopeful that with the amendment as it passed, we can get serious about building new housing, we can get serious about building affordable new housing, and keep moving forward.
Where do we go from here?
Let's keep going up and
Straight?
then to North Como, yeah.
Okay. This is real St. Paul here.
Yeah, welcome to it. We are still technically in Ward 4. Across the street is not, so we'll stay on the side of the street.
I don't know if it's because I'm just not a St. Paul person, but biking here, every time I find myself biking to St. Paul, I'm like, I hate biking on whatever street I'm on. Maybe I just don't know the secrets.
I think we have a ways to go before we get to where Minneapolis is in terms of bike infrastructure, but give us until we turn left. It's going to get better.
Okay. You're taking me to a better place, right? You're taking me to a better place.
Yeah, we're going to a better place, and then we'll see how far we get. If we end on Summit, we can have a big conversation about why some of our bike infrastructure needs to be improved.
So looking at your website, it seems micro-targeted exactly to me. You start with, first you start with constituent services. You're trying to win over the longtime homeowners who are just like, will email you constantly and they want a council member who will respond. But then you get into zoning reform. Ooh, very sexy. And then you talk about transportation and biking and pedestrian safety. And I'm wondering, like, do you live this? Are these things personal to you? How did you come to make these your top priorities?
Good question. We are all so a product of our own experiences. It is hard for me to imagine having a different set of priorities if you are somebody who lives in a city and likes living in a city and wants to see our city actually work for people. It's like, how could you not be talking about land use and transit? Like, where people live and how they get around is pretty much the bread and butter of what I see city governments as doing, in addition to a few other things like public safety. So, for me, I live in Midway. I was a renter until fairly recently. My husband and I rented downtown. Then we bought our house, moved to Midway. We're off of the Green Line when we lived downtown. Bought our house so that we could stay off of the Green Line. We're not fully off of the car life. We have a car, but we bike, we train, we bus. We want to live in a dense, walkable community that actually welcomes new residents and remains affordable. Like, this is what cities should be. I think it's why we all live here versus, far out in the suburbs. So I don't know, it feels, my platform feels very obvious to me.
Okay.
And hopefully to other people.
It speaks to me. Do you know what the status of the land value tax is at the legislature? Because things need to happen at the legislature before that could be implemented on a city level, right?
Yeah, they do. So I've talked to a couple of different members of St. Paul's legislative delegation. I think that there's interest. My sense is that it's not something that there's been the most thought given to. I know people in St. Paul have been pushing the conversation. I think that there's a lot more we need to do in order to really get it on the radar of the people who can actually implement the policy change that we're going to need if we're going to do it, like around Snelling University.
Is that where you think it would come in handy?
I think that this is where sort of the Ward 4 version of this conversation has centered, is what do we do about the fact that we have an astronomical number of vacant buildings in this critical corridor? How do we change the financial calculation of the corporations that are sitting on these empty buildings? Well, a land value tax is a really important way of doing that.
So Minneapolis has upped the fee on vacant buildings, and I'm not sure how successful that's been, but it's in the conversation to either tax or up the fees on vacancies to try to get landlords motivated. Is that something you'd also be considering if the legislature doesn't act?
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think that there's so much, here's how I think about city government and how to run a progressive city where you actually need to get things done. It's really awesome to know where we want to get and what do we want the legislature to do? What do we want the national environment to look like so we can do whatever we want? And I don't want to build a plan for our city that relies entirely on outside actors doing what I want them to do. So I think that making sure that we are, and then we'll cross and then go left.
We're gonna go on the street?
There's a bike trail.
Okay.
It's the nicest bike trail on this ride. So the city council passed administrative citations or enacted them into the city charter in St. Paul this year. It's now going to be on the ballot in November because some folks are trying to stop the city from using that tool. But yeah, so obviously first step is making sure that in November we maintain the ability to leverage administrative citations as a tool here in St. Paul. But I think that is absolutely the best tool that we have at our disposal with some of these vacant lots. The other, one of my top priorities, if elected, is first thing on the council, August, September, working with the Department of Safety and Inspections to figure out what are our other options. Like, again, I keep coming back to the CVS, but it's been vacant for 3 years. It's at the most important intersection in our city of Snelling and University. The idea that we don't have the tools to force the building owner to sell is, I think, ridiculous. We do have the tools, we just need to understand how to leverage them. And I think administrative citations are a huge, huge piece of that.
There's been a lot of talk, so that's one of the news items that has bled over into Minneapolis is the struggles around that CVS, University Avenue. And what do you do for neighbors who see that as like an immediate livability issue, like an emergency, needs to be addressed immediately? Like what are the immediate steps to take?
I count myself among those neighbors who think that this has to be priority number one for the city. I mean, not to go too far into it, but it's just like, this is a core livability issue. We've seen how the disinvestment, the lack of regard for Midway has spawned a whole host of other issues. I think one of the things that frustrates me the most, and maybe we'll get into this, but we can talk about Kimball Court. I think that there have been some real challenges around Kimball Court. But if you talk to folks in the neighborhood, what they know is that a lot of what gets blamed on Kimball Court is actually a result of the vacant CVS. It's the result of having all of these vacant buildings that attract folks who are using drugs, that are attracting folks who are committing property crimes. It's so frustrating, and it has to be top priority. So I think number one, already said, deal with the vacant CVS, deal with the other vacant buildings, leverage every single tool at the city's disposal, including administrative citations to deal with it. I think you also, we've seen, I think, some really promising updates with Kimball Court are starting to see how that housing first policy really can work. I think we need to do more to support folks who are sort of struggling the most in that part of Midway. Really need to make sure that we're fully funding the homeless assistance response team, doing the ongoing outreach to folks who are in need, making sure we're connecting with the county to get those basic city-county services provided when it comes to public health and other support that's needed. And then we've got to be talking about how are we bringing in the investment that this neighborhood deserves, whether it's a grocery store, whether it's more affordable housing, whether it's more public amenities. I mean, there's just so much more that folks in Midway deserve.
Is there a transportation project that you have upcoming or recent in St. Paul that you're just super excited about? You think it's like an example of how it should be done?
I mean, the big one in Ward 4, obviously we just got the Beeline. Everybody is super hyped about that. I think, already starting to see it. I saw a stat the other day, I think ridership is up 23% over the 21. Like really starting to see how folks in our community are actually using public transit when it is fast and reliable and will get them where they want to go. So I'm pretty stoked about that. The big public transit / multimodal transit conversation right now in the ward is around how do we implement the comprehensive bike plan? What does it look like to actually build out the infrastructure that the community has demanded through that process? How do we fund it? How do we actually get the job done? So I think that that's sort of front of mind, is how do we make that promise real? The other thing, this is like less so a project and more just how do we make what we already have work well? Living right off the Green Line is huge for Ward 4. We have to get things like signal priority done. We have to make sure that this is actually the best way for folks in the neighborhood to get where they need to go, instead of it feeling like this is always a second best option after driving a car, after using the freeway to get to Minneapolis or downtown St. Paul. So that's something that I know is really top of mind for folks, especially in my neighborhood.
Aside from like exciting transit projects, what street project where they have either like reduced lanes or added a bike lane or added bump outs? Can you think of any street projects that you're excited about?
I'm trying not to answer this making it about bike lanes, but I do think that, top of mind there is Summit. How are we making Summit safer and more bikeable, and also slowing down traffic? One place where we need to do a lot more in terms of improving the street itself, and we're gonna have to work with the state on this, but Snelling is huge. It's a massive public safety issue. Everybody in St. Paul knows somebody who's gotten into a car accident on Snelling. You have people absolutely flying down Snelling because there's virtually no traffic calming devices. They're turning off into the neighborhoods. I hear this in Marion Park, I hear this in Midway. People who are like, these cars just come absolutely flying down, no regard for kids, no regard for pedestrians. So there's a lot of talk about how do we both improve the street for drivers, deal with like the actual surface of the road, but also invest in the traffic calming that the neighborhoods really need.
Do you have a property tax solution? How do you get those property taxes from increasing exponentially?
This is a huge topic. So I think there's a bunch of things. First, we know that a huge part of why property taxes are going up so high in St. Paul is that we've lost a bunch of taxable properties and businesses downtown St. Paul. So the stat that I keep coming back to is we've lost something like $20 million in tax revenue downtown alone since the pandemic. That doesn't just get taken out of our budget. We don't have $20 million to spare. So the cost of paying for that gets redistributed to homeowners, get passed on to renters in the form of higher rent. So I think we can't be talking about how do we address property taxes without talking about how are we bringing investment, development back to the city of St. Paul. How are we using the fact that we just passed this amendment to rent stabilization in the hopes of people building here to ensure that people actually build here? How are we taking advantage of office to residential conversions downtown? How are we helping to support the young entrepreneurs and thinkers who want to do awesome things, do that in the city of St. Paul? So that's just like, honestly, it's like so almost boring, but it's like that's how cities build revenue. That is how we get the money that we need in order to provide the social safety net, to build out the programs that we want to see, to do all the things that we think are so necessary to making this an actually livable city. So I think that that's our best option for building sustainable revenue and decreasing the burden on folks who are impacted by property taxes. There's also been, I think, local government aid has to be part of this conversation. We know that the state is not in the rosiest of financial times as compared to just a few years ago. So in talking to folks in the state delegation, I think that it's clear that we're not going to be able to get everything that we need from the state, but that's a piece of it. Cities rely on state funding. The other thing that I think in St. Paul is super top of mind for folks is we just have a pretty significant chunk of land that doesn't pay property taxes. We've got all the government buildings, we've got a ton of colleges, we've got a ton of pretty large nonprofits. People in Ward 4 have been very clear that they want to find better ways for those non-taxed entities to pay into the city's coffers to help make the city run. I will say, people have been talking about this for decades in St. Paul. It's obviously not easy. We're not going to be able to snap our fingers and get millions and millions of dollars to run all the social programs that we want from the private colleges and other entities in St. Paul. But working with them, figuring out ways that they can make those voluntary payments and help take some of the pressure off of folks is critical.
What's the public safety question in St. Paul?
So I think that there's actually been a good amount of pride in the city for what we've done on public safety recently. I mean, the decrease in homicides, I don't know if this broke through across the river, but is something that I think is a real testament to years now of thinking differently about how we do public safety in St. Paul and making significantly more investment in preventing violence from happening rather than responding reactively when violence does occur. So that's huge, and I do think it's something that St. Paulites take a lot of pride in. The other thing that I just think is worth mentioning and things that are going well is over the last year, maybe 2 years, we've seen crime go down on the light rail. I think that that's really important. It's obviously not where we want it to be, and we still have a lot of antisocial behavior happening on the light rail, but I do think there are some things that we should take a lot of pride in. That said, definitely, I think two things. Public safety, there's what can feel like a smaller thing, but maybe I'll mention it first, is just the traffic and parking situation. I hear from folks throughout the city about how one area where we need increased enforcement is when it comes to people parking in pedestrian crosswalks, parking too close to the corners, just creating these situations that are super unsafe, where everybody's worried that we're going to have an increase in very serious accidents. I think that, again, not always like top of mind with public safety, but it is something that I hear about a lot from people. And then we've already talked a bit about Snelling and University, but I think in general in Midway there is very real concern about property crimes, about sort of about a real sense that social safety, that safety for all of our community members is lacking. I think the city has a lot of tools to address that. I think we're doing some of it really well. I do think that there are some places where people legitimately aren't feeling safe in our neighborhoods, and that's a huge problem, and I think we need to take it pretty seriously, and I think we need to do more, particularly in Midway.
Do you have a sense, so in Minneapolis, we recently changed our government structure to a strong mayor system, something that St. Paul has basically had forever. And people still struggle in Minneapolis to understand that the mayor is in charge and they have these big expectations. Well, I emailed or I called my council member, get it done, do this thing. Like, do people in St. Paul also struggle to understand who is in charge? What role the person has that I'm contacting about my problems? Do you know the answer to that?
If I'm elected, I'll have probably a better answer for you in a month or so. I don't know that we have a huge problem with it. I do think that people understand, at least in my conversations, people understand that it's a strong mayor system, that Mayor Carter is going to be, is the one both with the ultimate sort of power in the city, but also deserves the most accountability. I think that's in part because we've had, especially in Ward 4, pretty strong council members for many years now who have helped people actually navigate, have done the constituent services well, have helped people see, like, here's something that the city council can do, here's what the city council can't do, here's what the county needs to do, like this is maybe not even a city issue at all. So I think that helps. And of course, like when you're running, which is all I know about, as close as I know to doing the job, people want a lot of big promises and they want you to be able to say that I will be able to fix this. I will be able to do this for you, like vote for me and I will make it happen. I think the more you talk to folks and are like, here's what that would actually look like, right? Like we're gonna have to work with city departments on that. We're gonna have to work with the mayor's office on that. It's gonna be a lot of relationship building and management to make sure that that is included in the city budget and is actually fully funded. I think people get it, but we've had it, like you said, for a lot longer than Minneapolis.
I'm going to unload the attack on you. This is what I've heard. Of course, I'm not from St. Paul, and this is only what I've heard in the last few days as I've been looking into this. She's not from around here. She's parachuted in. She's well connected. Look who her dad is. It's not Norm Coleman. It's Chris Coleman. She knows the mayor. She's endorsed by the mayor. This is an insider. She's not one of us. Yeah. How do you respond to these attacks?
I laugh a little bit because I have gotten some of this of like, well, I had somebody being like, do you want me to give you a tour of Midway? And I was like, I live in Midway. I don't know totally where. Some of that is obviously grounded in reality of like, my dad was mayor, I come from a political family. She's not from here, she doesn't get it. I'm not sure where that started. I mean, whatever, I just do all of my neighborhood creds. I live on the same street I was born on. I went to Central, which is super close to my house. I grew up in this community, in this neighborhood. I rented in a different ward before I bought my house, that's true. I've lived in my neighborhood for almost 3 years now. I feel super plugged into the community. I think that as I've been out on the campaign trail, most of the time I'm not learning about issues from those conversations. I'm getting new perspectives, but they're issues that I'm experiencing, that I've seen, that I am living, being a part of the community. So, but of course, like I, again, come from a political family. I did know the mayor before all of this. I certainly did not expect that his endorsement would come because I volunteered on his campaign when he first ran for city council. It came from my commitment to doing the work and knowing what the job is and how to get it done and being grounded and principled and having integrity. But I think it's a fair question for people to ask of like, are you working for this? Have you earned it? And I hope that what I've shown over the course of this campaign is whether, it's somebody who I've known for a while or somebody who I met months ago, I've been able to earn their support and show them what type of council member I would be. Let's go left here.
Oh, I forgot to ask about Summit. You've alluded to it a little bit, but like, strong supporter of Summit Avenue? Are you frustrated by how that has played out? What is your position there?
I'm a strong supporter of the bike lane. Sort of the way that I've been talking about it is like, we have a real challenge, which is that we have this major street that is critical for both people who live there, people who travel it to get to work, people who travel it to get to different parts of the city. Underneath the street, there's infrastructure that's 100 years old. We have to replace the pipes. We have enough sinkholes in the city of St. Paul. We've got to address those. And with that challenge of having to redo that infrastructure, we get the opportunity to figure out what type of street do we want to have when all is said and done. How are we actually investing in our climate goals? How are we making it safe for bikers? How are we truly building the bikeable, walkable, multimodal city that we want? And that has been, repeatedly reinforced by the residents of St. Paul that they want. This conversation is coming up a lot more in the last couple of weeks than it was at the start of this campaign, because this issue was dealt with years ago. And I think that there's always room to be like, did we have the best possible process? Was everybody's voice included? Did we get it right in terms of community engagement? But the city council approved the bike lane. The Met Council approved the bike lane. There are questions that remain about some of the final details, about the funding, all of that. But I think for the most part, people in Ward 4 are either excited about the bike lane and strong supporters, or at a minimum, like, it's time to move on. We've covered this ground. We had a chance to weigh in. We've got to move forward with the decision that the city made. So, strong supporter.
I have to admit, I'm having a hard time hearing some of your answers over the traffic noise.
Sorry.
So I have no follow-ups to that. So, final question, I think, is make the case for yourself. What are you offering that your three other challengers are not offering? And if you can, be as negative as possible on the other candidates.
I'm sorry to provide bad content.
I know it's ranked choice, but please be as negative as possible.
Here's what I have to say. I think we are really lucky in Ward 4. We have serious people who are running for this office who care a great deal about the city of St. Paul. So without being too corny, I think that that's real. Here, I think, is the case for me. I love St. Paul. I believe in our city. I know what the city council can do and how to use the tools that the city council has to meet the needs of the people of Ward 4. I know that there's so much that we didn't have a chance to talk through. Obviously, bike lanes are a huge one, but how do we get density right? There are some key development opportunities in the city, in the ward, West Rock, Luther Seminary, places where we get to think about what type of city do we actually want to build. And I think and hope what I've shown over the course of the campaign is that when it comes to those issues that matter to Ward 4 and that are actually within the city's control, I'll be principled, I'll be progressive, and I'll make sure that we actually build the type of city that we all want to see, one where we have housing, where we have a strong economy, where we have bikeability, walkability. So that's what I'm running to do. I'm under no illusions about how hard the job is going to be for the next few years. We have a challenging budget situation in the city of St. Paul, to say the least. I think that we're going to have to make a lot of hard choices, and we're going to need people in City Hall who take the job very seriously and who are willing to go to bat for the top priorities of the people in Ward 4, while also knowing when to compromise and knowing how to actually make the city run.
Thank you, Molly Coleman, candidate for City Council in Ward 4 in St. Paul. And special election August 12th, right?
August 12th, and it's the general. Nobody remembers that.
Yeah, special election is your final word. How many years left on this term?
3.
So you're running for a 3-year, what's remaining of the term. Okay, Molly Coleman, thank you. This has been the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. YouTube.com/Wedge Live to watch this, by the way. Should be watching these episodes. Thank you for listening.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.